Hello, this is Visitations Conversations. The purpose of this program is to provide inspiration to people aspiring to go deeper into the world of comics and entertainment. Please check out, always screw this up, excuse me, please check out the channel for more interviews that range from comic creators, podcasters, cosplayers, and filmmakers. My name is Scott Larson, and I am the creator of the independent comic book series Visitations. Visitations is a history of Chicago as seen through the eyes of the residents of the city's oldest cemetery. It's part history, part horror, and part action adventure all rolled into one. It's kind of like the Untouchables meet Indiana Jones in a graveyard. If you're interested in reading a free digital copy of issue number 1 of Visitations, please email me at visitationscomicbook, all one word, at gmail.com, or click the link in the description below. Today, I'm really excited because I am joined by my friend, Ruby Spencer. And for anyone who does not know who Ruby Spencer is, she is a model. She does both photography modeling and art modeling. And she also is a burlesque dancer, a teacher, and a cosplayer. So Ruby, anytime you want to come on, we're all set to hear from you. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, sure. Now, the first time I met you was at Wizard World in 2019 or 18.
One of those two, yeah, right before the Panini, but yeah,
Yeah, so that would have been
2018.
okay. So it would have been 2018, or no, actually, I think it was 2019.
Okay.
And you were dressed up as the Linda Carter Wonder Woman, and your costume was so fantastic. You looked like the real thing. And it was a really funny convention because there was you who your costume was phenomenal, and you looked really, really great. But then there was somebody there who was dressed as the Michael Keaton Batman. And you know, there's a lot of them drifting around, but when I went home that night and I was getting ready to go on the bus, he was actually waiting for the same bus. So it was 10 o'clock at night at the Jefferson Park bus station, and Batman was standing there. So it was an interesting convention, and both of you were actually spotlighted in that next issue of my book because your costumes were so fantastic.
Yeah, I love when at Wizard World when we get to see some of the more we'll say vintage cosplay as opposed to things that are, you know, very timely pop culture wise right now. I always love seeing those types of costumes. My first time at Wizard World in 2016, I saw somebody cosplaying as Robin Hood from the animated movie, but dressed as like the stork, you know, in his costume when he went to do and I would like, it was the best kind of reference for me. I loved it.
That's fun. So, so how would you define yourself? You know, you heard my multiple ways of describing you, and you know, certainly because the channel is comic related, we would lean heavier on cosplay, but you do a lot of other things. So where would you put yourself first on that list?
I think I would probably just refer to myself as an entertainer.
Okay.
In any variety, multiple things, you know, even before I dipped into cosplay and burlesque, I did swing dancing and was like a promotional model at pinups at local events. So I've kind of done a broad range of the entertainment, and attending Wizard World and kind of diving into that whole world is what started me on my cosplay journey.
Gotcha. So I'm going to ask you some more about that in just a minute, but I'm curious, how did you get started?
In general?
In entertainment.
In entertainment. You know, I came from a non-entertainment background. I was an athlete. And when I moved back to Chicago after living on the East Coast for a few years, I wanted to try something different. And I met some people here locally in the vintage community, and they're kind of what helped me get started in doing the promotional modeling and swing dancing. And then it's just, you know, similar to most people's stories, you meet somebody at one thing and they introduce you to the next thing, and it just kind of is a ball that rolls downhill, and before you know it, you're doing all the things.
Talk about this vintage community. What is that exactly?
Yeah, so there's a really large community here in Chicago. Vintage community is kind of a loose term for it. It's people who enjoy dressing up in vintage. They like to go out. You can find them often at like the Green Mill, or other places. They like to go listen to jazz music and are often friends with the musicians here in the area that play sort of that like jazz, blues, big band. Many of them go to events where they can swing dance. If there's local car shows or a motorcycle show, we have Motoblot that happened just last month. That's a big bike and moto show. They kind of pop up all over organically. I know several of them that also do DJing in a lot of bars here in the city. So you can tell where they are because they all dress similarly and they're mostly dancing and doing all that kind of stuff.
What era do they usually follow?
I think it's probably more 30s to 50s. Sometimes you can find folks in the late 60s, early 70s, but I would say predominantly the vintage community is more in that like 40s, 50s era.
That's really interesting. So this group of people goes to like different things like jazz bars and how did you find them?
So when I moved back here, I did a pinup shoot. It was my very first like photo shoot. I did it with Vavoom Pinups here in the city, and became friends with Heather, the owner and photographer. And she introduced me to a couple people and encouraged me to enter the pinup contest that happened in Motoblot that year. And I just met a bunch of people and I liked them, and they invited me to do these things and come to this event. And when I wanted to learn to swing dance, I found Big City Swing, which now doesn't exist. It's kind of transitioned into Traffic Jam swing. But meeting people in swing dancing was really what opened my eyes to the whole vintage community here and everything that's going on.
Can I ask what year that was?
That was in 2014.
Interesting. And the reason why I asked that is around the turn of the century, like the new turn of the century, not like the old turn of the century. There was a big comeback for the swing dancing, and a lot of the styles too, like the hairstyles. And we were talking about one of the models that we both know earlier. They were 1920s styles, and so when I was in art school, the models were coming in, and it was pretty cool because I was going to art school in 2000. But my dad had grown up in the 30s and the 40s, and he fought in World War II. So I was very familiar with that era, and I listened to a lot of music from that era, and it was cool because the school I went to is the one that he went to as well. And so these models had these hairstyles which probably weren't that different from the hairstyles of the models that he went there. It was a long explanation, but it was a neat little thing. And so it's interesting that was going on in 2014 as well. What would you say the average age of the people in the vintage community is?
I would say probably 30s, 40s. I mean, there's definitely some. I met quite a few that were in school at the Art Institute, so even early 20s, but I would predominantly say 30s, 40s, maybe even like early 50s is probably the demographic I typically see, mostly because I'm 40, so that's like right in. Most of the people I meet are typically around my age range.
So, were you doing any kind of photo shoots before that?
Nope, that was my first.
Okay, so talk about that for a minute. What kind of, you said it was a pinup?
It was a pinup. Yeah. So Vavoom pinups at the time, they're kind of growing and evolving now to doing more. But at the time, they were very much gearing their photo shoots towards that classic 40s, 50s pinup style poster with like the, solid background, little props and cute outfits and things. And when I lived in DC, I had come across some of her work on a blog and thought to myself, like, well, great, when I move back to Chicago for my 30th birthday, I'm going to do a pinup photo shoot because it looks so cute. I've been interested in vintage stuff for a long time, and so it seemed like something really fun. And then through meeting Heather and shooting with Heather, she was the one that kind of said, like, well, check out Model Mayhem, and if this is something that you might like to do, you can get involved. And I met quite a few people early on through Model Mayhem and did some fun shoots, outside in the city, more pinup stuff and some more like fine art style. That's actually how I ended up meeting my partner. Was we ended up shooting through connecting in Model Mayhem, and then sort of grew our relationship that way. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really neat. So, so how many? Well, okay. So you're doing the. Oh, let me go back to that in just a second. So you started doing the pinup shoots, and then you do burlesque dancing as well. And so is that? Did you find that through a separate venue, or was that part of all of it, and it just kind of like fit together? How did that work?
Actually, one of my really good friends that I had met through the pinup community, she was in the pinup contest, that same first pinup contest that I did. We had become really good friends, and she had been taking burlesque classes here and doing a little bit of performing. And so she had said to me, like, hey, I think you would really like this. You should give it a try. And I brushed her off for a while, and then eventually started taking a couple classes just for, I like to try new things, and especially when it comes to things that require movement and exercise. And so I thought that would be something fun and kind of to supplement the swing dancing that I had been doing. And I didn't intend when I started taking classes that this was going to be something that I spent so much time on later in life, but it was really fun. I liked it. She's the reason that, I'm doing as much now as I am.
So, okay, so I have another question for that, but before I ask, I have a different question beforehand. So you talked about the pinup contest. Did you win?
I did not. No, that year, that was a really interesting, it was one of my first contests I ever did. I was very nervous. And at the time, that contest was based on audience applause. And there were several girls in the competition who were part of like the bike clubs and everything. So they had a lot of friends and fans there. And so the top 5 that year were all people that were somehow involved in some of the groups that were participating in that show. But I did get to meet a lot of really great girls, some of whom I'm still close friends with today, which was, ultimately that's why you like to do those kind of activities, is to get to meet people and have fun. So
how would you describe the burlesque shows that you're participating in?
It kind of varies throughout the city. There's a couple of shows that are full scale kind of cabaret style variety shows. Untitled has one on Thursdays. There's one that happens once a month at the House of Blues. And there's a couple more throughout the city. There's a lot that happens at Newport Theater and Lakeview. Those are kind of your full scale hour-and-a-half, 2-hour productions that have a variety of different performances. And then there's places like Ina May Tavern and the Drifter, which is downstairs from the Green Door Tavern, that have more like pop-up style performances.
Okay.
I see your face. Are you not familiar with the Drifter? You definitely.
Oh, the Green Door downtown?
Yeah, the Green Door on, the Green Door on Orleans and Huron.
Yeah.
If you go down to the basement, there's a speakeasy down there called the Drifter.
Oh, that's really that I did not know.
Yeah, they have entertainment Wednesday nights through Saturday nights. It happens like every hour. There's a pop-up performance, and they're not all burlesque. Sometimes there's musicians, sometimes there's comedians, sometimes there's circus performers or acrobats. So it just kind of depends. So depending on the type of show you see, depends on kind of what type of burlesque you're going to see. My style is more classic, a nod to sort of our original, what we consider our original burlesque dancers of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. All the way through the 70s. And then you could see people doing nerdlesque, which is very popular. That sort of, there's a show that happens at Newport called Plan 9, which is basically what we call nerdlesque, which is essentially cosplay and burlesque together.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. So, and then, for anybody watching, burlesque isn't like a strip joint or anything like that. And as a matter of fact, you're not the first burlesque dancer I know. And I have gone to different shows myself, and my wife has gone with me to these shows. And the thing that's really fun about it is a throwback. And there are like comedians and there's everything else. And once I think a lot of what happens in the art community is there's a bleed over with the acting community. And I think part of that is because of the models, as well as they're looking for, art models are looking for jobs, but they're also actors and actresses. So do you do any acting?
I've just done a very, very little, and it really only started over the pandemic. I actually went out to New York and filmed some stuff for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel during the pandemic. That was really interesting. And I had such a good time that I came back, and I've done a couple of like brief little background extra roles here in the city. And I have a friend who's also a burlesque friend that's been trying to encourage me to submit to some agencies, because why not?
What did you do for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
So season 4, not to put any spoilers out because it's been out since March, but season 4 takes place in a burlesque theater. And so at the time they were looking for people who could play 60s strippers. So I submitted all my information, and there were about 16 of us that were kind of like the core group of background workers in the backstage, bits. And some of them are burlesque dancers, some of them are theater dancers from New York. I think it was just me and one other person that came from outside New York, because they don't pay for that. So that was really, me getting there was on my expense. But it was really fun to, they put us all in vintage costumes from their giant warehouse of costumes and things. So it was really fun.
So do you have a copy of the episode you were in, or was it more than one episode?
I'm actually in a couple of episodes. You can see my face in like episode 3 and episode 4 briefly. And then episode 2, you can see me and she ends up walking right by. So you get a really nice view of my backside and this like really cute vintage base. So as I teased my mom when I let my parents know that I was in the episode, I said, Amazon is getting my best side here.
There you go. So did they just do an open call to anybody, or how did that work?
They did a call on backstage.com, and through a couple of performer friends here, they had directed me towards the casting company that does the extras and background casting specifically in New York for a lot of shows that film there. And they had just a live call, and anybody could go and create an account on their page. So you get notifications when they're looking for things. And then it's really just sending in your information and seeing if the company and the directors are looking for you or in need of somebody like you. And yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. It was just an online, but at the time COVID was still rampant and before any of the vaccines were out. So there was a lot of starting and stopping with the scheduling, and they were looking for people at the end of 2019 and didn't end up actually casting or doing any shooting until 2021. So yeah.
So how did they handle the stuff with the pandemic?
We were always in masks up until, basically the point that the director said action, and then somebody came around and they had little bags with your number on it so that you could put your mask in it and come back. We had to test. So even on days that we weren't shooting, we had to come in and test. So you had to have 2 days worth of negative tests before any time you had to come on set. So I was there for roughly 3 weeks, and we only shot for 4 days, but I think I tested like 12 times the time that I was there.
So they didn't, and I'm getting into like the minutia of this, but it's interesting. So they didn't, they didn't fly you out and they didn't put you up. You did that on your own, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when you went out there, did you like basically book a place for a month, or were you like a day by day thing because you didn't know how long it was going to take?
Well, they had originally said, here's the dates were essentially like a long weekend. It was 4 days of shooting. And so I had planned to go out with enough time to do the pre-testing and do my fitting for costumes and then stay. But then because of scheduling, we get one shoot date in, and then we get an email the night before that said, okay, the shoot tomorrow is being moved to Wednesday and whatnot. And so thankfully I was able to just like keep bumping my flight and everything. I think I ended up staying for 10 days the first time. And then they kept adding new dates and rescheduling things. And so I had like 2 days to come home and do laundry and go back again. So it was definitely, for somebody that's very much a planner and likes to know things ahead of time, that was very stressful for me, having to just be reactionary, but I definitely don't regret it. In fact, I wish I had stayed longer, but at some point I had to just like call it quits and come back here and, continue with the rest of my life. But
So I have to ask, because it's, we live in Chicago, and I've been downtown a couple times since the pandemic hit. And, certainly there's a lot of people saying different things about downtown Chicago right now, all of which I didn't see. However, I will say that I stopped in the building I used to work in, and it was a ghost town. Or at various points it has been. And people have deserted downtown Chicago. No one's really working down there anymore. What was New York like?
New York was weird. We were there at the very beginning of 2021 in March. So a lot of things were still closed down. It was busy because it's a big city, so it's ultimately going to be busy, but definitely not to the level that it had been previously. My partner and I, we had a day off, and so we went and did the whole boat tour down to the Statue of Liberty Island and over to Ellis, and it was not very crowded. It was really easy to get onto at the last minute, which is not usually how those things are. We did a lot of ordering in of food at the hotel just because so many things were closed. Though we were able to eat out at a couple places. The one thing that New York got right faster than Chicago did was those restaurants adapted to outdoor dining. Almost every city had a like wood, kind of built-in area for people to sit outside with little heaters and everything. So they were much more prepared to have to deal with continuing their service outside than I think Chicago was.
That's really interesting. So we'll move on. That is really great. So before I move on, are you hoping to do more things like that?
I think it would be fun. The casting company for Maisel kind of teased us early on in this year saying like, hey, we want you to come back for season 5 because season 5 is the last season. Okay. And I was like all prepared to drop everything that I was doing and go out there. And then we got an email that said that they, changed their mind and they were going to focus more on front of house. And so, they'll let us know. And we haven't heard anything. I mean, I guess still get emails for other roles that they're looking for, but specifically for, the special background role that they haven't picked anything up yet. Ideally, I'd like to try to do more things. I feel like there's more shows and movies that are gearing more period piece. And so I don't know why people couldn't utilize a, like Hollywood glamorous background role or anything. I don't have any aspirations to be the next Meryl Streep, but I do feel like I have some skills that I can offer people. So, in the meantime, while I have the ability in my schedule and in my life to do sort of some fun things, why not?
Have you looked into the Chicago stuff? Because there are things always being filmed here as well.
Yeah, I had been following for a while, the Chicago shows, the Chicago PD, Chicago Med, they have their own separate extras casting. And I've joined on to a couple of different extras casting companies here. I did something for The Time Traveler's Wife last year. That was on HBO. So
Yeah.
you only saw my dress in like the back of one episode, but I have my mom like diligently looking in everything that I'm in. I guess I did a couple of episodes of 61st Street, which is off of AMC. So I've been in a couple episodes of that. And then, I keep getting the emails, and depending on my ability to do it, I would like to do it. It's fun. I've met some really interesting people while I've been sitting there, in the extras pool all day. It's just hard because they can't tell you when they're going to be shooting. And if I have a show that evening, that basically means I can't do anything that day. So that does limit some of my ability.
So tell me about your cosplaying. So I clearly I had met you when you were dressed as Wonder Woman. So have you done anything else past that or no?
Yeah, Wonder Woman was really, I love Wonder Woman and I love Linda Carter. And so when I went to my first Wizard World, I was there with a couple of people. We had done a pinup calendar. So we were in Artist Alley selling our pinup calendar. And that's how I had met Java, the producer of Bachelor Pad magazine. And he was also there. And he was the one that had invited me to return the second year. And I was really excited. And I did all my like little pinup cosplays. I think I was Rosie the Riveter one day, and I thought it was really fun. And I just enjoyed seeing everybody's costumes so much that I felt like I was missing out on such an opportunity to like really just nerd out with the things that I love so much with everybody else there. And so I think it was that year, it was 2016, when I decided I am going to make a Wonder Woman costume, and I am always for accuracy. So it took me about a year, and I had the costume before I even had an opportunity to wear it anywhere. And it's evolved now, like now I have the big cape and everything. That same year I did Julie Newmar Catwoman. I also did Zatanna. And then what else have I done? I've done a couple other things, but I like to gravitate towards the more vintage classic. Last year, over the pandemic, I worked on Scarlet Witch, which was really appropriate because the movie had come out at the time. That was very kismet. I did not plan that. That just happened to work out to my advantage. But I did the comic book version instead of the movie version, which I was able to wear last year, which was really fun.
And I believe I saw you in that last year. Did I not?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It got confusing after a while because there's so many different costumes. There's so many
Yeah.
Everything else. Are you planning to go to any conventions this year? I know that you were not at Fan Expo last week, but
yeah. It's tough because of my schedule. I want to go to C2E2. I always have intention of going to C2E2, and then life happens and I have gigs and I can't make it. So one of these days I will get there. Well, I'd love to go back to Fan Expo. I usually go with Bachelor Pad magazine and I work the booth and sell merchandise and everything. And I think with the changes and stuff, he wasn't selected for a table this year. So we
Okay.
didn't end up going, which worked out okay because that was my dad's birthday and I ended up having family things that weekend anyway, which would have kept me away from the event in general. But yeah, I'd like to get to some. I know I have a friend that's just like begging me to go down to Dragon Con with her. So one of these days she's gonna win and I'm gonna eventually make it there.
Okay. That's fun. So
Mhm.
you're teaching now as well.
Mhm.
You're doing a number of different things, is what you had said. But
Mhm.
so I'll ask you about the teaching, and then I want to hear about everything else afterwards. So tell me about what you're teaching.
Yeah, sure. So at the beginning, well, during the pandemic, actually before the pandemic, I had been talking to my partner about using his photography studio space when he's not using it to hold burlesque classes and maybe costume construction related classes and things I was interested in that I wanted to be able to provide that knowledge to other people. And then the pandemic happened, and so nobody was doing anything. So it gave me an opportunity to kind of put more thought to it. And at the beginning of this year, I opened the Chicago School of Burlesque, which offers dance and drag and some circus classes to anybody in the city and burlesque that wants to participate. So the schedule's kind of been sporadic this year as I figure out what the community is looking for and where people's interests are. But we just finished our first 8-week classes last week, and they had a student showcase, which was really fun. And the new 8-week session starts this week, and we've got some workshops through the rest of the year. So it's very busy.
How many different classes are there?
It depends. Right now we have 2 ongoing 8-week classes. The last session we had 3. It really depends on teacher availability, to be honest, because I am relying heavily on people who are active in the community, and being active in the community means they have a lot of gigs, which means it's hard to, as with theater people and anything like that, when the more on your plate, the less freedom they have to do things like teach. So it really depends on the teacher's availability.
Um, so where are you hoping to take this? So you've got an 8-week class schedule coming up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, how many students do you have?
There are about 10 to 12 students in each class. We cap it at 12 typically, just because that's a lot of people on, a smallish stage at the same time. It's a lot of cats to wrangle when you're trying to teach choreography and things. So we try to cap it at 12. We did have a workshop earlier this year with information on like how to get booked and how to get into the burlesque community here. And we had about 50 people at that workshop. So it kind of depends on the topic. We've had as few as 4, which is great for when you're doing poi and you're spinning things in the air, that 4 people can really spread out. Ideally, I would like it to be a little bit higher. I think a lot of people are still very tentative with things, with everything going on with COVID still, and just everybody's concerns about safety. So,
Sure. Real quick, I want to go back
yeah,
because I have a question for you, but I want to go back to your beginnings because I
sure.
feel like we kind of touched on them and then we just kind of moved on. So
Mm-hmm,
you mentioned that you were an athlete.
mm-hmm.
What were your intentions originally for what you wanted for your life? Did you want to be in sports? Did you want to be doing something else? What were you planning? And I asked that because you did say that you plan everything out.
I
So my assumption is that you had an idea in mind for your life, and it sounds like you went off in a different direction. But I'm curious,
did.
what were you looking at the beginning?
So I played volleyball in college, and my plan was that I was going to graduate college and I was going to get a job coaching at a college. And that was my plan. I was just going to continue volleyball until my body could not handle volleyball anymore. And the year that I graduated, there was only one assistant job open, and it was down in the South, and it was for $16,000 a year.
Okay.
And I am passionate, but I am also very, very much a realist. And I knew that I was not going to be able to live the way I wanted to on $16,000 a year. And those jobs don't require you a lot of free time to get it's not like gig work. You can't like pick up other jobs to supplement your income. Like you live at the gym in those jobs. And so I decided that that probably wasn't the best for me. And I ended up getting a job at a nonprofit out in DC, which is what led me to leave the area. My father works in nonprofits, so that's kind of how that happened. And I still played volleyball afterwards. I got into a lot of clubs. My sisters play volleyball as well, so we were very much a volleyball family. And so I kept playing pretty much until I moved back here, and then I realized that I wasn't having as much fun with it as I thought that I was. And so I took a break from volleyball and had too much time on my hands. And that's kind of what prompted finding all the other activities and trying new things, because I like to be busy and I wanted to find a way to supplement what I was missing from, not having the volleyball anymore.
So you want to be busy,
Mm-hmm.
and you find ways to keep yourself busy. Now, what you were telling me before we started rolling here is that you've been working a lot with your hands. What have you been doing?
Oh, costumes. I'm
Okay.
turned this way specifically because the rest of my office is just an absolute disaster. I have, I make all my own costumes, both cosplay and burlesque performance costumes. And so every time I finish one, my brain is ready to pick out what the next project's going to be and start working on that. So I actually had 2 costumes in process, and then got an email last week that Untitled wants to do a Marvel versus DC show. And so I'm finally, after years, my partner has been bugging me and bugging me and bugging me. I'm finally going to do a Wonder Woman burlesque act, but I have to remake some of the costume pieces because that cosplay isn't suitable for, on the stage and being able to take things off. So he's dying because I'm here with I got my gold rope and my red, blue, and gold fabric all laid out because I'm working on that costume right now.
And so do you so with the exception of your school, do you ever make things to sell for people?
Not usually. A ton of people have asked. I started doing classes to show people how to do things, both conceptualizing things and also kind of basic construction for beginners. I still consider myself learning. I'm still trying to hone my skills because I'm a self-taught sewist. So there's always some trial and error. And people have asked me about, would I make a costume? Can they commission me for a costume? But my thinking is, if I start to do it for money, I might not like it as much. And making costumes is one of my favorite part of performing. And so I like to keep that. I like to keep it as my project. I'm happy to help people do, I've definitely put zippers in corsets for some people occasionally. I'll do small little tasks that maybe are beyond the scope of what somebody could do themselves. But as far as a full costume, I've just been doing that for me. It's something that's really satisfying and I really enjoy it. And I would hate to, just do the grind for money and realize I don't like it as much anymore.
So for anyone who's watching who would be interested in any of the things that you're doing, whether it's costume making or the burlesque dancing or the modeling, what kind of advice would you give them?
I definitely think if there's somebody that you see online that's doing things that you're interested in, reach out to them and ask, for advice on how they got started or who they can talk to about getting involved. All those communities kind of have different resources. The art modeling community has different resources. The burlesque community has different resources. Doing modeling in general is different resources. So if there's somebody that you admire who maybe lives locally to you, a lot can be said for just reaching out. I think I've heard from people before that they said like, oh, I didn't want to bother you, and I didn't want to bug you for things. And I said, please, just, the worst that can happen is I'm too busy and I don't get a chance to respond. The best situation is that I see your question, I'm like, oh, here, and I throw you 4 links for things to, to research and stuff. And if anything, any of the communities that I participate here are very welcoming to new people getting involved. And so you really can't go wrong by reaching out to somebody and asking for, a couple tips or a little bit of guidance.
Mm-hmm. And then, so where can people find you?
I am online. My website is rubyspencer.com. I'm also on Instagram at rubyspencerchi, CHI. I'm on Facebook as Ruby Spencer. I'm on TikTok as Ruby Spencer. I am everywhere that you need to be. You can find the school information is at chicago-burlesque.com. We're also on social media, Chicago School of Burlesque. Yeah, those are probably the quickest ways. Instagram, I'm on pretty regularly, Facebook also, but websites have the most robust information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and then, so is there anything else? We were talking earlier about ArtPad.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. My partner, who is a photographer and artist in the area, started a figure drawing group called the ArtPad. It happens at his studio in Avondale. It's once a month right now, so we'll see how that goes. But it's essentially just a place where people who want a chance to figure draw. We had a couple students, I think, from the Art Institute come to the one in May, which was really nice. It's just an opportunity, a very low stress environment to come and draw for an hour and a half and get that practice in. Everybody's been really, really nice. They love to look at each other's artwork and comment on things. And he tries to get a variety of different models so that there's different body types and things, so that there's variety for the artists.
And then, so where can that be found?
He is on social media at the ArtPad Chicago, I believe is the Instagram, or on Facebook at the ArtPad. You can also find his information through the photographer account at Art Blanche. That's usually, he'll post things there as well.
Mm-hmm. And then I think we're going to end that right here. But so thank you. Hang on, don't hang up before I'm done.
You got it.
But thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
It was nice to chat with you.
Yeah, you too. And anyone who is interested in finding out more about Ruby, all of her information is in the link. All her links are below in the description, as well as a link to get a free digital copy of my comic, Visitations. And so thank you very much for watching. And thank you again, Ruby.